I welcome this motion here today. I note that the government doesn't have an amendment to it, which means that they're going to allow this motion to pass with no intention of actually implementing its demands in terms of dramatic reductions in pupil-teacher ratio, investment according to OECD averages and so on. It makes a bit of a farce of this place, to be honest. Our primary schools have been run on a shoestring for decades. It's simply not possible to run a school on the stingy capitation and ancillary grants that are doled out by the Department of Education, and the government knows this, but it intends to continue along those lines. The government knows that school principals are having to endlessly badger parents to fundraise to keep schools running. The government knows that underfunding schools forces them to operate as mini NGOs dependent on charity. The government knows that this places schools in working class areas and children with additional needs at particular disadvantage, but it doesn't seem to care. I was in touch with lots of principals in my area to ask what this looks like on the ground, and I got a whole series of horror stories back from people. Here's what one principal of Rathcoole Educate Together National School says: "We have to ask parents every year for voluntary contribution just to stay open. Electricity and heating are skyrocketing with no extra funds to help. Our parents group killing themselves fundraising so we can buy sensory toys and yard equipment. We need sensory room in the mainstream, but these are not standard, so we have to fundraise for this, over €10,000. As we are in temporary accommodation with no hall for 4 years, we looked at renting a hall for PE, especially in winter, but there's no funds to cover it. I had a full SET position empty most of the year due to the teacher crisis. What are they doing about it? Nothing, absolutely nothing. They need to find staff, extra AP posts and pay them properly. No one wants an assistant principal 2 role as it's ridiculously low. I'm getting paid for 8 teachers, but not the 11 SNAs, the cleaner, the secretary. I have a team of 21, not 8, and that doesn't even include the bus escorts." I could go on in terms of what that principal says. Another principal says, "This year, we only had a part-time SET teacher when we were entitled to a full position, as we could not find someone for the position. We were often left without substitute cover too due to a shortage of subs. Our secretary recently switched to being paid by the department, and the remaining money they sent in our school's ancillary grant was €400, which is to cover 2/3 of the school year for maintenance costs. That is not enough to pay a caretaker for 1 month, never mind 2/3 of the year. We have to rely on the goodwill of staff and parents for basic needs like cutting the grass and maintaining the school property. Extremely stressful on the principal and an unfair ask of staff and students forced to go above and beyond." There's another issue in my constituency where 2 schools, Riverview Educate Together National School and Sedanta Special School, have been forced to share space since 2020 because the department have failed to provide the new school buildings that were promised. As a result, parents in Riverview tell me that children are being taught and cared for in toilets, offices and corridors, particularly impacting children requiring movement and sensory breaks who are relegated to hallways and toilets. One child, incredibly, sees an art therapist weekly in a cupboard in 2024. For many years, students have had no access to a school hall or indoor PE as the hall is being used as a classroom. The frustrating thing about all of these horrific stories is that it's completely unnecessary. The government has a €65 billion surplus. It could fund everything that schools need tomorrow, and it could resolve the housing crisis that is such a big driver of teacher shortages.